gave away a lot of my jackets when I stopped practicing.
He's so cool.
Another former lawyer?
Yeah.
You always drag them in with you.
It's a perk. It's a perk.
Really?
Now, I want to say before we start that actually I didn't invite you here tonight to meet Lisa and Bob and enjoy their new books. It's a lemon giveaway. How many of you had trees that in the storm yesterday just fruited all over the ground? So if anyone wants lemons, I'm going to lob them out. And we also have, just for Lisa, and I want you
I'm a girl from South Philly. I know you can eat actually grow lemons.
All right. Is this color coordinated? And this is a fabulous chocolate tulip. And it's perfect.
This is exactly my first life right here.
Perfect.
Isn't that clever? There I was in CVS. Looking ahead to what they were actually going to wear. But seriously, we're going to give away chocolate tulips tonight, and I have 3 books to give away tonight. So if you stay to the end, you get to participate. But meantime, I'm going to put the lemons on the floor. And we'll start talking. All right.
I don't know you say if they stay till the end. I've never been here when people have walked out. But you walked out? Don't walk out.
Never on you.
If we talk too long, they get out.
Yeah, we'll
it's
keep it
often because the restroom's in the middle of the store.
Okay.
It's not necessarily a walkout. Now, to accomplish this without this, I hate this joke. Right. So our theme for this evening is going to be extending what we do into new areas or fun, exciting things, which we try to do. And I wrote to you about the man from Encyclopedia Britannica, one of the most electrifying events we have ever done. I'm never going back to Wikipedia, unless he says, you want to know about the Kardashians, because the Encyclopedia Britannica doesn't actually do pop culture. But go to Britannica.com. It's absolutely amazing. But what they give you is real news, real information, not fake news. And they have adapted over 250 years. They are now partnering with Google and Alexis and 2 airlines. I can't remember what all. So they're my inspiration now.
Yippee.
And apparently they were yours, because look what you guys have done.
It's Darwinian.
It is.
Darwinian.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Bob, you, who have written many wonderful legal thrillers and also the Tracy Crossline series, a spy story, and it's wrapped around it, or within it is a courtroom drama. So clever.
So you want to know about it?
I do.
Yeah.
No, I was just bringing it up.
So years ago, I talked to Kristen Hanna, who wrote The Nightingale, and I said, where did you get this story? And she said, sometimes good stories just fall in our laps, and our job is to get out of their way. So I was telling Lisa this back room, I got an email from a guy who said he had just read The Jury Master, which is way back, and he loved it, and he thought he had a story for me. And you know, right? Anytime anybody says that to you, you're like, no, I don't think so.
Run.
And then about 2 days later, he had read the 2nd and the 3rd book, and said, I really think I have a story for you. And I was like, yeah, this is getting weird. I don't know. 2 days later, the 4th book, I said, what is going on here? So I Googled, and I found him, and it turns out he's a legitimate businessman in Seattle, very big company, does very well. And I thought, okay, this is odd. So I made arrangements to have coffee with him down the street, and just before I left the house, I went on Google and I went through 7 or 8 pages to make sure there was no mass murder, thing out there, convicted of some crime, and I found this one article that had a similar name but not quite right. So I can't say his name, and you'll know why in a minute. But it say his name was John Jones. It was like Edgar J. Jones, something like that. So I got there, and he was sitting outside, and he had my book, so I'd know who he was. And he stood up to greet me. I said, hang on a second, let me get my tea. So I go in, I get my tea, I come back out, and he stands back, hold on a second. I said, are you aware that there's an article on Google about a former CIA agent who was acquitted of espionage in the 1980s? And he said, that was me.
Oh, wow.
So I said, tell me your story.
Not such a hard sell after all.
And he did, and the short of the long story is, while it was very interesting, and the trial, which in my book, the last maybe 50 pages is the trial, that's all very close to the truth of what really, really did happen. But the story he told me, it wasn't sexy in today's market. But what was sexy was Russia. And so I said to him, I always wanted to bring back Charles Jenkins, who's a former CIA agent living in seclusion on Camino Island, and he gets married and he's got a young son, and I've always wanted to bring him back. And I said, if I wrote an espionage thriller where he goes into Moscow, into Russia, which I went to Moscow for 3 weeks, would you help me with the espionage? And he said, sure, I'd be glad to. And that's where it came from. It's a really fun book. It was a really fun book to write because it's a lot of stuff you'd never think about. When I sent it back to my agent, to Meg read it and she called me and she said, do we need to talk? Because it's so real, and the things that he did throughout his career, and it's one of those books that we all look forward to writing, where it's just fun. It's a chase book. It's an outsmart the other guy book. You got a Victor Fedorov who works for the FSB that's going after him, and he's trying to outsmart what Jenkins is going to do next, and they're always one step ahead and two steps ahead, and it was a thrill. It was really fun to write.
All right.
Yeah.
That sounds so great, because I think all this Russian stuff is infuriating and fascinating.
Yeah.
And now recently they said the guy in DC now they've admitted that the head injuries weren't that he fell down the stairs. It's present day. It's present day.
It's present day, and all that stuff comes in. I did a lot of research on Putin and Putin's Russia, and I read. If you haven't read Red Notice by Bill Browder, fabulous book about what Russia is really all about. And the scariest thing of all was they said Putin is not about ideology. It's not about communism or socialism versus capitalism. He runs a criminal enterprise, and he runs a criminal enterprise just like the mafias, the Russian mafias, the Italian mafias. Can't discriminate, right? The Italians are in there.
We're a lot less well organized.
We're trying to figure out what we're having for dinner, right?
We're adorable. Yeah.
So he's a really, really scary guy. He's a really scary guy.
He's a bad guy.
And he's frightening. And all the stuff about going after the agents in England and all that stuff, trust me. He went after Browder. And that's why Browder wrote the book. Because he figured with a book out there, Putin was going to have to back off. Because if he suddenly dies...
Well, didn't he kill Browder's friend?
He killed his lawyer.
Yeah.
So Browder had a lawyer. The short of a long story is Browder started the Hermitage Fund because we had perestroika and Russia was opening up. Well, Putin gets into power and Putin says, "You owe me $50 million."
Oh.
And Browder says, "No, I don't." He says, "Yes, you do. $50 million. You back taxes. I'm not paying you $50 million. I'm going to throw you in jail." So Browder gets out of the country, but he hires a lawyer. And he hires a lawyer to defend him. And the lawyer gets arrested. And the lawyer gets thrown into prison. And the lawyer suddenly dies in prison.
Is it Magnitsky?
Yeah, it's the Magnuson Act, I think is
Magnitsky Act.
Magnitsky Act. And so here's the real. This is all you need to know about Putin. So Browder, they tried to get a red notice against Browder, which is goes through Scotland Yard, and he doesn't get it. So then Browder convinces the powers that be in England and the United States to put a freeze on a lot of the oligarchs' funds, and if they travel outside of the country, they're going to arrest them. So Putin's response was to prevent any American from adopting a Russian orphan.
Why?
And that was his way of getting even with Browder.
So did you watch him during the Russian Olympics? Did you notice that his face doesn't move at all? It's so Botoxed. Seriously.
I wouldn't say Botox.
I thought maybe he did that for cosmetic reasons, but now I'm beginning to think it's so he can't give anything away.
I know, but have you
It's
seen
like
his
a
shirt?
real
I think
soul
his chest is Botoxed.
That might all be
I'm
true,
telling
too.
you.
Yeah.
And did you say?
Yeah, right.
Not that I looked. Okay.
Well, there's a big Russian men. There's a big thing about Russian virility, and that comes up in the book.
It only goes on in Russia?
They
Come on.
Okay, more.
More.
But there's this belief that Russian men are stronger than their counterparts, and that's why the Olympics had all the steroid problems. Is Putin wanted to win gold medals to prove again that it was thing. So anyway, it was a fascinating book to research, and having been there, it was really very interesting. Somebody said to me, "Well, would you go back?" I'm like, "No, hell no."
Actually spent a week in St. Petersburg where they tour you around. Rob and I went to, and we were with a group called the Friends of the Hermitage, the museum, a few years ago. It was wonderful. We got to spend an entire week inside. Otherwise, if you're a tourist, you get 2 hours if you're truly lucky. But if you do this other thing, but they're replacing Stalin statues with Putin statues even as you're there because he's from St. Petersburg, formerly Leningrad, whatever. So, well, let's move on to high school pranks.
Let's talk about a suburban development. I love to see Barbara, and thank you for having me, and thank you all for being here. It's so funny because whenever I see Barbara, she's been like, to Tasmania, and I was in Atlantic City.
I'm going to Tasmania.
Are you going to Tasmania? I'm so happy. I didn't even know that.
It's my birthday present from Rob. I get to go to Tasmania for New Year's in 2020.
See, I'd still be married if I had a husband like that.
It took me one husband more to get Rob, so don't give up.
I didn't. The last time did you see my engagement ring from before?
Yeah.
I'm not engaged. I bought it to remind myself to stay engaged with life.
Yeah.
And then, did you see that I committed to myself? I feel sure this will last.
Did you have a shower for yourself?
No, I didn't have a shower. I didn't.
Sorry. She's got somebody she calls Flat Bradley.
I do.
I want you to
Yes.
because you know what? I seriously thought he was there for dinner when I looked at that photo. I thought, how did Lisa snare Bradley Cooper?
As we know, I'll be the comic relief tonight. I always come here and discuss my celibacy, which is still intact. You'll be happy to know. Year to year, I'm dying on the vine. And so I happened to mention that I like Bradley Cooper, and then God bless my readers who sent me little pictures. And then one reader sent me a cutout of Bradley Cooper on cardboard, and I thought of these kids who have like Flat Stanley. And then I thought, why should these brats have all the fun? And so then I said, well, I have Flat Bradley. And then somebody sent me a life-size Bradley Cooper. And I watched the Super Bowl with him alone in my house. My daughter was like, Mom, are you okay? I'm not worried about you, Mom. We had a great time.
So it was on Twitter, and I thought, boy, here's a hot Super Bowl date.
I know, like people think the writing life is so glamorous, isn't it?
So seriously, actually, first thing I wanted to ask is give us an update because I thought I read some movie news about your legal series.
I do. I actually have. Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Rosado and D'Annunzio has actually been optioned. And by some Lionsgate, legit. And that,
We know that.
that's, what do I know about Hollywood? So that's exciting. Something else has too. After Anna has also been optioned, which is wonderful. But as you know, and as I always say, I'm a book person. So as delighted as I am by that stuff, because I hope it will bring people to the books, I'm very proud of the books.
Yeah.
I love books. And I'm happy that I'm a complete control freak, so I get to have the book exactly the way I want it.
Yes.
Absolutely true. So in this book, I was not kidding about high school and pranks. The genesis of this book, right, was that you wanted to explore the effect that an unwise decision, there are never any by high schoolers, right? No, I never ever made a bad decision. How it plays out years later.
Well, the real, and since, now you have the Facebook thing, but I'm going to keep it real, even though we're filmed. I know I'll regret this. But you know me well enough. I mean, when I think about what sort of animated this book, I'll say it's looking back on a teenage prank. And usually I'll say it's when I used to hitchhike when I missed the bus. that's a true thing. When I look back on that now, I think, what were you thinking? But really, the real emotional truth of the book comes from my first and second divorce to thing 1 and thing 2. I look back a lot and I go, what were you thinking? Like, what were you thinking when you made these decisions? And exactly. And sometimes, like, isn't it amazing that you survive your mistakes that you make when you were younger? And in a way, you're better for them, you hope. You're certainly more broke for them, but that's what I wanted to, secretly that's what this book's about. I mean, in theory, it begins when these kids get together and they're teenagers, and I sort of thought a little bit of myself, for a change, because she's she's an outsider in her high school, and they're the cool kids. In other words, she's in Latin club like somebody you know. I wasn't even the president, I was the vice president of Latin Club. It's really sad. But in any event, and when I started to research the book, I said I want to sort of explore something. So I went back to a high school, and I smelled the cafeteria, and I remembered this moment, which maybe you remember. Because they all smell the same, like cream corn kind of. And you come out of the row, and you're holding your tray, and you don't know where to sit.
Yes.
Sometimes I get
the loneliest feelings.
It sucks, man, and I get it. I also get it at weddings. I mean, so in any event, I said, let's write that. And the story, briefly, is I went to Russia and I researched it. It's not as cool as that. It's just these 5 kids in a suburban development. And the one's the outsider, the others are the cool kids. One day they get together. And what I'm trying to explore is the relationship, what is justice? And so here it is. When they get together, they play a prank. It's a terrible prank. It goes horribly wrong, and somebody ends up dead. And since they're kids, they think, we can't get caught. Remember when you were like, I'm going to get in trouble? And so they all run away, and they don't get caught. And then what happens is, the real question in the book is, what is justice when there's no punishment? Because I think if you look at my earlier standalones, you're always sort of thinking, and we think this generally, oh, if somebody went to prison, justice was done. But I think the more and more we, especially you guys, reading and thinking about what is crime, what is punishment, what is law, what is justice, and how are these things different, you start to understand that punishment isn't really justice. So I wanted to explore, and I do in this book, what happens in the absence of punishment, because they get away with it. And so the girl who's sort of the Latin club person, her whole life, because she was never punished for this, and truly, we're not sure if she's exactly culpable, she punishes herself her whole life. I sort of thought, there's a lot of women I know. Okay, this is how bad I am. I still remember a Blockbuster fee I had for $37. I punished myself over dumb stuff. So I know she's gonna punish herself and second guess herself and feel guilty. And for 20 years it ruins her life, and then she decides to go back in time, really investigate that prank, try to figure out how this kid ended up dead. Why? Because what I finally understood is there's some truth to that slogan of no justice, no peace. She can't have peace in her heart unless she understands and can do a sort of justice after the fact. The law can't touch it. The statutes run. I don't want to go into the fact situation, but there's an issue about whether there will be civil or criminal liability. So it's not a wrong that the law can correct. So where is justice then? And what does it matter? And the real reason it matters is, frankly, for love. It all comes back to Bradley Cooper somehow, but that's the gist of Someone Knows.
Since this is being filmed, can I just say that I'm happily married?
Damn it!
And none of my pranks involve murder.
I was just thinking how difficult for Bob to be sitting between Lisa and me, who can score up so many former spouses, and he's only had one. So
What a guy.
I know.
25 years this July.
Like what? He does, right?
Really, I've been married for like almost 60 years. I'm not impressed. No, I am. Actually, I've been married for around almost 30 years. So see, it does work out.
And 30 years ago, I had sex, so it's all right.
I always want to have the last word.
It was too serious.
So I do think that the basic issue issues underneath, all of this in your book really are important, because you're absolutely right. There are things the law is not equipped to deal with.
It's interesting because in a way we're doing a similar thing, which is mine sort of like inside a family, but his is on a bigger scale,
Right.
political. Can the law deal with Putin? Well, we're struggling now.
Yeah.
Let's see what it does to Julian Assange or whatever. I can't. How do you pronounce his
Yeah,
name?
you got it.
Assange.
Okay. I mean, finally, the Ecuadorians have had enough. Out he goes, and it'll be really interesting to see. But I mean, those are kinds of things where the law is really not necessarily the best machinery for affecting whatever resolution one wants.
Sure.
Or if there is even a resolution for somebody like that.
No, and it gets really complicated. Like in this guy's trial, there was a lot of documents that proved he was innocent,
Right.
but the documents were sealed as national security interests, so they couldn't come in. Couldn't come in court. And so, what do you do as a lawyer? What do you know your client? There's documents that exist that say he was over there, he was working on a mission, and it went wrong, and blah blah. No, the documents can't come in. And you have federal prosecutors that are the ones that are saying those documents can't come in. Well, if they're saying they can't come in, then they know that the guy's innocent. But he's going to go to jail for life. It's bizarre.
So are they setting him up, kind of?
Pretty much.
Well, there was a couple of things at play. It was, it kind of comes out in the book, but there was a couple of different things at play. And it wasn't necessarily that they were setting him up, but they needed someone to take a fall
Yep.
because of what had happened.
Scapegoat.
And he got caught in the middle of it. And so one of the things that was difficult is the beginning of the book is exciting. It's a chase and they're getting through it. So what do you do when you get to a trial? Because you've tried cases and like 90% of trials are completely boring, right? So I had to keep the tension up. One of the ways to keep the tension up is to let the readers know exactly what's at risk for this man. He's going to lose. He's going to go to jail for the rest of his life. He's got his wife just had a new baby, who he probably will never hold. Who he'll never have birthday parties. He'll never go to Little League baseball games. He'll never be able to take care of his kids. It was different type of tension. But that's what this man faced. He had 5 kids, and he was looking at going away forever.
And is it treason or murder that what's he go away for?
It would be for treason.
Yeah, well, then you can get killed for that.
Yeah.
You can, absolutely. I'm glad you said scapegoat. Do you all know that the scapegoat was actually a salaried position in Imperial Rome? If you read mystery all the time, you would have read Stephen Saylor, for example, who one of his books, set in Massilia, which is now Marseille, was about a scapegoat. And it really was a civil position with a salary, and his job was, to
Take the fall.
take the fall. Right. This is the kind of thing you can find on Encyclopedia Britannica. But it is.
We just call it the blame it pitch now.
Really.
The best thing about reading mystery is your brain becomes like this gigantic grab bag of absolutely unassociated and often completely useless facts, but extremely helpful when you're interviewing in a situation. You're never at a loss. You can always come up with something. But I was just amazed to discover the etymology of words is fascinating.
Agree. Latin Club. I'm just telling you.
Yeah. It's great that you have matured to the point where you can admit it. So what other high school memories have you got that may come out in future books
Oh my God.
that we could discuss?
It's all nightmares.
Was it Catholic high school?
No, it wasn't.
I went to an all-boys Catholic high school. Let me tell you, there are a lot of stories that will never come out.
And it can come back and bite you, because I remember at the end of her life, my mother lived well into her 90s, and at the very end she did go into assisted living, and I can still remember when she would get her, it was the same thing, like picking up the tray and walking in and wondering where you were going to sit. And it was just this awful flashback, for her and for me, I think, when I had lunch with her, and we both realized that was just like going back to high school, which in many ways is the unkindest time of one. Actually,
definitely.
junior high may be the most slightly more.
Yeah.
Junior high, there's like no level playing field,
Yeah.
right? Because everybody's maturing at different ages, and the whole bit. High school, there's a little more parity.
It's funny because
But it's so hard.
I just came from Virginia because it was nice. They picked my books to read for a county. And so I spoke to the high school. And they did a tape of it. Now, so you give your speech and you try to, you don't make any sex jokes. That's why they're just stuck inside me and they had to get out. But you try to teach them about writing and all this stuff. So then I open it up to questions, and I'm trying to get in it. And the first question, and I tell about being rejected. Kid raises his hand, and he goes, "How did you feel when you got rejected?" And then as soon as he says it, the kid next to him shoves my, "You're so stupid." And then I was like, you know what? I looked at this kid. He was small. He was littler than everybody. And I was like, you know what? The way you feel is like being bullied. So I just went there with the kid, and it was just, I don't know why I don't tell that, but it just moved me, because you see, it is like that. You feel, it's like this cafeteria. You're ashamed. You don't fit in. You've got a lot of nerve to try. Who do you think you are? All that negativity. These kids, man, I give them a lot of credit.
But you know what we had an advantage, which is that we could leave it at high school.
Exactly.
And today, with social media, you can't do that. And I think it's much more pernicious and dangerous now than it was. You could kind of shrug it off after lunch, for example. But now, I'm just horrified by some of not only the kids, but the parents that get involved in bullying and whatever it is. It's really, high school's got much more dangerous stuff.
Well, and also, when we were growing up,
dangerous.
we know there was suicide, but the flow of information is so important. First Amendment really matters, but now that's something that can happen, and so it's in the consciousness of these kids. And I was looking at these kids, and there were a couple of these kids, and I was like, you know what? I wasn't sure what to post. I didn't want anyone to make fun of him.
Right.
It's just a really hard time for them. I give them a lot of credit.
It is, and unfortunately, nature is not fair either. So sometimes kids really are small or have glasses like this. I mean, I had to wear glasses until I was 8 years old. That makes you really.
But it was nice to talk to them about books, because I do think books. I don't know how you feel, but they nurtured me growing up. They nurture me now. I always feel very calm and centered when I read, in a way that I don't, especially after I've looked at social media.
The Sam Hell is all about being bullied.
That's right. Tell
The
us
whole
about
book.
Sam. This is an amazing.
The whole book is about a kid born with ocular albinism. He's a 40-year-old man looking back on his life with ocular albinism, which means he has red eyes, and he's called the Devil Boy. And he goes to Catholic school, and he's bullied not only by the kids, but he's bullied by one nun in particular. And it's a horrible thing, because it's like Harry Potter. He can't hide it. Back in the 60s, he couldn't put on contact lenses, and he couldn't hide it. So he's got to learn to live with it. And it's it's horrible. I have a younger brother who's handicapped, and so I experienced a little bit of that. But the book is not his story, but it comes out, and there's something really horrifying about a young kid being bullied. It's a terrible thing. But I forgot what I was going to say. But I was going to say something
I
else.
sometimes feel that stuff is kind of a justice issue. People when they interview us, sometimes Barbara's too smart to do this. A lot of times they talk about the books are about law, and I think the books are about justice.
Yeah.
And there's a difference, So it's about fairness. So it's unfair to pick on a kid. And to me, any headline, kids in cages, whatever the headline is a justice issue, and you can have a view about that, and you don't need a law degree for it.
No, and when you try cases, or when you handle cases, you realize very quickly it's not about justice. I mean, you're trading horses, and we'll pay this, and we'll pay, you shouldn't have to pay anything, but it is. It's just what can you live with? You're not going to be happy. Your client, tell your client, you're not going to be happy, but what can you live with?
And then you look at it kind of writ large with. Now, am I too caffeinated? We're getting on. No, but this cheating scandal is interesting to me, because it implicates a lot of stuff that. In the domestic thriller, how far will a mom go? They're saying, well, I love my mom. I love my kid. I would do it for my kid. But now here you're going to have, what they did was horrible. They're teaching their kids horrible values. On the other hand, should Lori Loughlin go to jail for 40 years when Julian Assange is going to get 5 at most? Interesting. Why Martha Stewart going and not some people, some politicians? We have such a justice system that is so rickety and unfairly applied vis-a-vis punishment, and it just drives me
nuts. There's another extension to it too, which started today. Is what about the kids that benefited from this? did they know or didn't they know? And do
I
you?
think they do.
Oh,
Do you
I
think?
well,
think they know.
They have
I'm just saying the question is up, and then the question for the colleges, what do they do? The universities, do they throw them all out? Do they, I mean, there's so many ramifications for the whole thing. It isn't just about the parents. It's also about
Right.
the coaches. It's about the kids. And what is the fair resolution of it?
Right.
You
And
know?
it's about
And
the-
what about the kid that didn't get in because that kid got in? Can you ever go back and do anything about that?
Right.
So I remember what I was going to say.
You do. Excellent.
And it actually
Hurry
it
up.
actually fits in. And so I got an email maybe about a month and a half ago before I started doing all my traveling, and it was from a principal at a Catholic school, and she said, "I wish I could give this book to every member of my staff." And I emailed her and said, "How many are on your staff?"
Aww.
And she said 40, and I called up Amazon, and I called up Danelle, and Danelle said, "We'll make it happen." So I sent them back 40 signed copies of books. So thank you to Amazon. But I've gotten all kinds of emails from teachers, from priests. I got an email from a priest who said to me, "You wrote my life story, and here's a picture of me." And he had a wine stain that covered pretty much 3/4 of his face. And he said, God could have put it a little higher or a little lower, but no, he had to put it right here. And he said, "I learned at a very young age from my mother. You have to learn to deal with it because it's not going away."
Yeah.
Well, you have a new publisher and a new contract for what is it you're thinking of writing next?
Well, I'm actually working on a historical fiction called Eternal. I'm like in the middle of it. It's very long, but I'm really it's about fascist Italy. And I said, I thought to myself, why are you so interested in this? Partly it's because of a course I took in college with Phil Roth, which was about besides that, it's this. If you're always looking at what is justice, it's really interesting to look at what is justice during a time when the laws themselves are unjust. Because I'm always I realize I'm just always playing with these concepts. So we think law will lead to justice, so the laws are just. But let's look at a time, for example, in fascist Italy, which is something I don't think a lot of people know about. For example, did you know there are concentration camps in Italy? I didn't. Okay, great. Everyone knew.
Don't be deflated.
Okay, well, back to the suburban development. I didn't know it. But I didn't know about these racial laws that were promulgated in Italy that were modeled on the Nuremberg laws and basically said it's okay to take the property from Jews and take them away. And Jews were rounded up in Rome in this incredible episode. And I said, I want to write about that because justice and what is justice differs in wartime. I wrote about it in Killer Smile. And if you read me before Vendetta Defense, I wrote about fascism. It's just always kind of haunted me, so I'm
It's
doing
an
it.
interesting point because I was just up in Vancouver for Left Coast Crime and drove back to Seattle from Vancouver. I would like to say that in the old days you just sort of waved at the border people or flashed your driver's license. Now it's like 2 hours, with traffic lights and all this other stuff. But at one point we passed a very moving sign, which was from the Japanese people who had been put into a camp during the war. And how do you balance out what were safety concerns or whatever
Exactly.
at the time, and now looking back we go, oh, that was terrible, but it's a different standard than when you're waiting for a repeat of Pearl Harbor and you think
Well, it's proof that the law, such as it is, or justice, is man-made and subject to all of our fears.
Yeah.
So, and that's in Killer Smile, because my grandparents, because they were Italian citizens living in this country, registered as enemy aliens and had their house searched and had things taken. I think I've said before, their radio was taken on the belief that they would use it to signal people, which it's a normal radio. It was like, the shadow knows. But
maybe they could have wired it to
believe me, they never left the kitchen, so really, I'm not worried about them showing up in, Stalingrad.
I was going to say my grandfather was a baker at the St. Francis Hotel. They never showed up in his house. He's making pastries. It could be bad.
We could be putting notes in.
But Lisa's right. I mean, justice is relative.
Right.
It's relative to situation. It's relative to the people enacting law, and it's really relative to people enacting law. For example, you read about, ICE getting information from Motel 6, for heaven's sake. If you stayed at the Holiday Inn, you might have been safe, but if you checked into Motel 6, they were furnishing ICE with all that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so much of life is just, timing and accident, where you are at a given moment. What if you'd taken a different flight if you were on Ethiopia Airlines?
Yeah.
There's a very famous book, which I read years and years ago, called The Bridge of San Luis Rey. And, it was a group of people, and the point of the book was to tell the story of each of the people who arrived at the bridge at the wrong moment. But you can fashion any number, but what if you've been on the bridge in Seattle, or the bridge in, where was it, Genoa, or whatever that went down, or you were standing too close to Mount St. Helens when it went up, or whatever,
I had a good friend who died in the San Francisco earthquake. She was on the 880 bridge when it collapsed.
I mean, exactly, just a
She was in
normal
rush hour
commute.
traffic coming
right. And it really is, so much of it is just an accident.
But the thing about the justice part is that what I like about it is it can come from us. Like in theory, if the law, like for example, the law that said you could intern people legally way back when was Korematsu.
Right.
And that said that was consistent with the Constitution. And now people who have read the Constitution pretty clearly going, that was bad law. Like we lost our shit a little bit, and that probably would be wrong, differently decided today. And what's cool about that, and very empowering for us, I think, is in theory, we would elect people who would make laws that would reflect what we believe is a value system that's just and fair. In theory. I know, but we gotta hope it, right? But let me tell you, regardless of all the politics today, I like to think, even though we all have ajita most of the time, because whichever you think, at least we're really involved. And that's a really good thing.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. I mean, and it is. That's a big thing. I mean, the more I travel, the more I realize, okay, it might not be perfect, but it's still the best system out there.
Agreed.
I mean, you go some places and, go to Southeast Asia and spit on the,
Or like
on the
Russia.
sidewalk.
Were you nervous in Russia? Did you think they listened in your room and stuff?
Well, I know they listened in our room. If you get the book, read the acknowledgments. I mean, it was like, we landed and there was 8 of us. And we stayed at the Hotel Russia, and the Hotel Russia was just when Putin came into power, guy came in and he bought the Hotel Russia and he was going to remodel it. It's the largest hotel in the world, and it's where all the expats stayed, and that's where we stayed. And the guy went in to remodel the Hotel Russia, and they found so many cameras, listening devices, and pipes for gas that it was going to be a national embarrassment. So Putin went to him and said, "You get $50 million, and you walk away." And the hotel his investment was much higher than that. And he walked away, and then Putin built the park. I forget what it's called, Zazaraya Park. And it's the first park built in Moscow in 50, 75 years. And Putin came out as this hero that he gave the park to the people of Moscow. Well, go back in time, my family checks in there, so there's 8 of us, 4 couples, and they put us in alternating rooms. So I'm in this room, empty. My parents, empty. My mom and dad, my in-laws, empty. My sister-in-law and brother-in-law. And on that wall is a huge mirror.
Yeah.
This is honest God truth. We had a whole bunch of things happen to us, and so we said, okay, we'll meet at 6. It was like 4 o'clock. We'll meet at 6 o'clock for dinner. Great. We all went in and went to bed. And we all could remember trying to get out of bed, and we couldn't get out of bed. We could not get up. It felt like your head was like 1,000 pounds, and you could not get out of bed. And every single one of us, not just me, not just my wife, all 8 of us had this problem. So consequently, what I would do every morning is I would get up, I'd come out of the shower, buck naked, and stand in front of the mirror.
I knew that sex was going to rule the subject.
This is a great signing.
There's Lisa behind the mirror.
we had all kinds of things happen to us. The first day we're there, we go out. Well, let me preface this by saying, my brother-in-law had the greatest idea ever. Before we go to Russia, he said, "Let's get flat tops,
Oh, Lord.
I don't know what that is.
like military
Buzz
haircuts."
cuts.
You got your hair?
Yeah.
You have great hair.
So we got
He's shorter than when
Yeah.
he was here before the trip.
we,
Believe me.
we got flat tops, and then we had berets.
Oh, Lord.
So I get to the airport and I hand this guy in green military garb. I hand him my passport, and he looks at it and he goes, "Niet." And I'm like, "Niet," and takes all my stuff, and they're going through everything, every single thing. So the next morning after we get through the whole thing, we get up, we go out into Red Square, and we're going, from St. Basil's to all over and all different places. And my brother-in-law says, "Take a look to your right at the woman in the white boots." Sure enough, there's a woman in white boots. She goes, "She's been following us the whole day." And then we went to Crumbs. We went all through and everywhere we went, she was there. And I thought, well, that's ridiculous. Why would someone spying on you, have white boots on? And then I talked to my buddy who helped me write the book, and he said, "Oh, no. She wanted you to know that she was there."
Oh.
So that was only one thing that happened. There's a lot more, and I put it all in the acknowledgments. One of the reasons I put it in the acknowledgments was to get even with my brother-in-law, because he made me go first to get the flat top, and then he chickened out.
Known yet for him.
I want to see that author photo. Did you use the author photo with the flat top?
I didn't do it with the flat, but I have pictures of it.
I want to see that.
Post one. I'll give you an Instagram lesson. Should be really fun. So, what are you working on? You said you were writing a sequel.
Yeah, so we were talking about this back in the room. I mean, we both work, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's not like, well, I work 2 hours and then I go. No, I mean, we go to work every day because that's what we did. That's what we did as lawyers. And I actually keep an office outside of home so I can go to work. And we were talking. I was saying, Lisa, it's not like I can say to my wife, "Hey, let's go golf," or "let's go." She works too, so it's like So I'm actually working on a couple of things. I have a new Tracy Crosswhite book that's going to be coming out early next year, which is in the copy editing phase. I'm working on the sequel to The Eighth Sister, and I'm working on another idea for a Tracy book, which will come out after that. And then the Eighth Sister is going to be a trilogy. It's going to be 3 books. I don't think I'll do any more than 3 books, but for one thing, Charles Jenkins is 64, so.
What?
No, I mean,
We've been
Yeah,
together
I know.
a really long time. Not quite 25 years, but actually,
No.
how long has it been? Well, think about this.
Well-
how long have we done this together?
I remember that. I remember that. I'll tell you 2 really quick stories. The first story was my first book signing, my first novel signing was The Jurymaster. And so they fly me to LA, and I'm going to go to a book club. And so they have a driver, and the driver takes me out to the book club, and I get there and they say, "Okay, hold on, you're gonna have to wait." I said, "Oh, okay." They said, "Yeah, Lisa Scottoline is in there right now, and she's signing books." And Lisa Scottoline was like John Lasqua, John Grisham, Lisa Scottoline, and I was like, "Oh shit!" I have to
And
follow
Lisa
Lisa
Scottoline
Scottoline.
never shuts up, so you're going to have to.
So as I walk in the door, like this is 2006, as I walk in the door, Lisa says to all the women that are there, if you haven't read him, you have to read this book. It's a great book. You're going to want to read this book. And they all sat down and stayed there and listened to me, so thank you. I remember
Happy to
that.
do it. He's a great writer. I'm a huge fan. So this is
And then I started coming for the first few books I did, and then I wasn't coming down here for a few books, and then you called me on the phone and you said, "Where have you been?"
I knew where he'd been. I wanted him to come back. But actually, Lisa and I have the longest history. We've been
We do.
together since her very first book, Everywhere But Mary Went.
Oh, my
We
Yeah,
met in the bathroom of the
1994.
New York Hilton. I still remember it.
and they're like, "That's Barbara. That's Barbara." That was like, but they only told me that later. I would have been nervous otherwise. But you read that advance copy and you called me on. You're just look. You know that we love her, and I know you guys love her too. And we just need to take a second to appreciate because honestly,
Yes.
thank you for supporting her. She's in the forefront of. She's made this such a destination and been in the forefront of the mystery and crime world since forever, and we appreciate it.
Yeah, we
Well,
do.
we just
We
do.
couldn't do it without you.
I always say when Barb says jump, I say how high.
Such power.
Just from Seattle to Scottsdale. I hope you're listening back there, publicity person and editor. And actually, I'm sure to hear you because every time he has a new book, I get to see him. So we should and Lisa also, because we've got a real streak going. I think you've only missed, or have we missed any?
No, and what's really important is this is the only place I've ever had a signing where I was completely drunk, and I think
We remember that.
it's not my finest moment. The thing that's amazing is me drunk isn't that different from me
You're just
sober.
like your family.
Right? Can you
I
really
don't
even
even remember that. Tell us
Huh?
about it.
No, I'm not saying a word. She swore me to secrecy.
It was Kathy Reich's fault.
You weren't
It's like they were there and
Was
we had
it that night when
margaritas.
you were here with Lisa?
Yeah, we
and
came
Yes.
over. I'm like, this is great. I didn't even smoke. I went and started smoking. I was like,
We're going to have to legalize marijuana in Arizona so we can
I've
have
never done
another
it.
moment. I think we should let the audience ask
Yeah, ask
questions.
stuff, 'cause we're,
And
you know.
Patrick, are you lurking back there in the back? Where are you? I want to
Take a
thank
nap.
our Facebook audience for joining us this evening and YouTube audience too. Thank you very much.
I do love my wife.